Beginning in the story, every decent property was either snapped up immediately or priced well beyond my budget. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, a new listing alert popped up on my phone. A historic Victorian home, priced to sell, with immediate possession available. The price seemed suspiciously low for a 5-bedroom, Victorian on 10 acres of land. The listing had only been live for 20 minutes, but I called the agent right away. A woman with a crisp professional voice answered. When I mentioned my interest in viewing the property, there was a brief pause before she said, "The Maddox estate is a unique opportunity, but I should mention it's being sold as is, and the family is keen to sell quickly." I asked why. She explained that the last family member had recently passed, and the heirs, living abroad, had no desire to maintain the estate. It seemed perfect, maybe too perfect. I arranged a viewing for the next day. The house was about 2 hours from the city, tucked into a valley that seemed untouched by time. As I drove down the long gravel driveway, the trees parted to reveal an imposing Victorian mansion that looked like it belonged on the cover of a Gothic novel. 3 stories of aging grandeur, complete with a wraparound porch and ornate woodwork that you rarely see anymore. The agent was already there. A slender woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair pulled tightly into a bun. She introduced herself as Margaret Keller. As we approached the house, I noticed she kept her distance, standing just at the edge of the driveway while gesturing for me to go ahead. "Aren't you coming in?" I asked. She gave a tight smile. "I've shown it 3 times this week. I know the layout well enough to guide you from here if you don't mind. I'm battling a cold and prefer to stay in the fresh air." It was unusual, but I didn't question it. Exploring the house on my own actually sounded appealing. The moment I stepped inside, I was met with a distinctive smell: old wood, dust, and something else. Something earthy and faintly sweet, like overripe fruit. The foyer opened to a grand hallway with a sweeping staircase. To the right was a parlor, and to the left a formal dining room. Both were largely empty, save for a few heavy antique pieces covered with yellowed sheets. Following Margaret's directions from outside, I explored the first floor. The kitchen with its ancient cast-iron stove, a library with built-in shelves long stripped of books, and a sunroom overlooking what was once a garden, now overtaken by weeds and wild roses. Upstairs, the second floor featured 5 bedrooms with high ceilings and large windows. The master bedroom still had a massive 4-poster bed, the only uncovered furniture. The third floor had 2 smaller rooms, likely servants' quarters, and an attic I hadn't yet explored. As I toured, I felt an increasing excitement. The house needed plenty of work, but the structure was solid and it just felt right. I could easily picture myself writing at one of those tall windows, watching the valley shift with the seasons. Back outside, Margaret was on her phone but quickly ended the call when she saw me. "Well?" she asked, still not approaching the house. "I'll take it," I said, surprising even myself. Something flickered across her face, some relief, concern, gone too quickly to be sure. "The Maddox heirs will be pleased," she said. "They're motivated sellers. If you can close within a week, they might even accept an offer below asking price." It felt odd. Everything about the sale was rushed, as if the family couldn't unload the property fast enough. But I was too thrilled about the prospect to question it much. The closing went smoothly. I never met any of the Maddox heirs. Everything was handled by their attorney, Philip Jenkins, a jittery man constantly checking his watch. When I asked about the home's history, hoping for a story to tell future guests, he muttered something about the family owning it for generations before quickly changing the subject. The only unusual moment came when I was finalizing paperwork. Jenkins slid a non-disclosure agreement across the table. "What's this?" I asked. "Standard procedure," he replied, avoiding eye contact. "The family values privacy. They just ask that you don't publicize any personal items or documents you might find on the property." It seemed odd but not unreasonable. I signed. 2 weeks later, I moved in. The first few days were busy unpacking and arranging furniture. I set up my writing space in the library, with a large oak desk I'd bought from an antique shop. There was no internet yet, and cell reception was weak, which I found refreshing. This was the escape I'd wanted, a place to focus on writing, without modern distractions. On my 4th night, something strange happened. I was reading in bed when I heard what sounded like footsteps on the 3rd floor, directly above me. Slow, deliberate steps crossing from one side of the attic to the other, then silence. I froze, listening carefully. The house was old and prone to creaks, but these were distinct footsteps. Grabbing my phone flashlight, I climbed the narrow, steep stairs to the 3rd floor, built for servants meant to stay out of sight. The attic ladder was down, odd since I hadn't touched it. "Hello?" I called, shining the light into the darkness. No answer, but the silence felt heavy. I climbed up, my heart racing. The attic was a large open space with sloped ceilings and small round windows. My flashlight swept over old furniture, trunks, and boxes. No sign of anyone. As I turned to leave, my beam caught a door partially hidden behind stacked picture frames. It was newer than the rest of the house, secured by a heavy padlock. I made a mental note to return later with tools, then went back downstairs, dismissing the noise as my imagination adjusting to a new place. The next morning, I decided to explore the grounds. The 10 acres included dense woods to the north and east, meadows to the south, and an overgrown orchard to the west. Behind the house was a wild garden, its original layout still hinted at by stone paths and weathered statues. At the northern tree line, I noticed a narrow gap in a faint path leading into the woods. I followed it. After about 10 minutes, I reached a clearing with a stone structure resembling a small mausoleum, its entrance blocked by a rusted iron gate. Above the gate was an inscription, Maddox, 1887. Peering through the gate, I couldn't see much inside. Near my feet, something caught my eye, a small, tarnished silver object half buried in leaves. It was an ornate pocket watch. Opening it, I found an inscription, "To M. Some debts can never be paid. Some secrets must remain buried. SWL. M was presumably a Maddox. But who was SWL? And what debt? That afternoon, I returned to the attic with bolt cutters from the garden shed. The old padlock broke easily. Inside was a small room, more like a walk-in closet, with shelves lined with leather-bound journals, dated from 1887 to 1972. I opened the earliest journal belonging to Edmund Maddox, the original owner. His elegant handwriting detailed the construction of the house, his business ventures in coal and railways, and his devotion to his wife Lillian and their son Thomas. But the tone soon darkened. The entries became terse, referencing the arrangement and our obligation. By late 1887, Edmund wrote about disturbances in the house and Lillian's declining health. The year's final entry read, "It is done. God forgive us." I reached for the next journal but was interrupted by a loud crash downstairs. In the kitchen, I found a cabinet door open and a broken dish on the floor. More unsettling was the small, muddy footprint on the clean tile floor. It looked like a child's print. I lived alone. There shouldn't have been any footprints. I searched the entire house, finding nothing else out of place. That night, I struggled to sleep. Around 3 a.m., I was woken by the distant sound of a child's laughter coming from outside. Looking out the window, I saw the moonlit garden and the forest edge, but no one. Then I spotted movement, a small figure darting between trees. I quickly dressed and grabbed a flashlight, heading out into the night. The only sounds were crickets and rustling leaves. "Hello, is someone there?" I called, no answer. As I turned back, my flashlight beam caught something white near the forest's edge. A small wooden cross, weathered and peeling. It was about 2 feet tall, stuck into the ground. I knelt to inspect it. There was no name or date. Shining my light around, I found another cross about 20 feet away, then another. 7 crosses in all lined along the forest boundary, and old, white and anonymous. A chill passed over me. I hurried back inside, locking the door behind me. Continuously, the door stood slightly ajar. On the kitchen floor, 7 small, muddy footprints led from the doorway to the center of the room, forming a circle. I couldn't remain in that house any longer, not without answers. I packed a small overnight bag, drove back to town, and checked into a modest bed and breakfast on the square. From there, I called Philip Jenkins, the attorney who had handled the sale. Surprisingly, he agreed to meet that afternoon at a nearby coffee shop. Jenkins looked even more uneasy than I remembered. His thin face was drawn, pinched with worry, as he slid into the booth across from me. Before I could speak, he raised his hand. "Before you say anything, Mr. Chen, I must remind you, you signed a non-disclosure agreement regarding any personal belongings or documents found on the Maddox property." "I'm not here about that," I lied. "I've been having some strange experiences in the house. I thought you might connect me with the previous owners, the Maddox heirs. Maybe they could explain some of the house's peculiarities." Jenkins shook his head. "That won't be possible. The heirs were explicit. They wanted no further contact. The sale is final. They've moved on." "Moved on from what exactly?" I pressed. "What are they trying to leave behind?" His eyes widened slightly. He began collecting his things. "I don't know what you're referring to. Our business is finished, Mr. Chen. Good luck with the house." As he stood to leave, I played my final card. "I know about the Riley children," I said quietly. "I know what happened at the mine on December 21st, 1887. I know about the arrangement with Samuel Langford." Jenkins froze mid-stance. For a moment, he looked genuinely terrified. Then he leaned in, speaking in a hushed voice. "Listen to me carefully. Leave that house, sell it. Burn it down if you must. Just don't spend another night there. The arrangement is broken. The boundary is failing. They can't be held back anymore." With that, he hurried away, leaving me stunned. That night, back in my room, I laid out everything I'd gathered, trying to connect the pieces: the mining disaster, the 7 Riley children, the secretive arrangement with the Langford family, and the boundary that was reportedly collapsing. What was being contained? I thought of the crosses at the forest's edge and the strange symbol carved into the doorframe. Were these part of the barrier? Then there was the locked attic room. What was it meant to hide? I knew I had to return. I needed answers before I could decide what to do. The next morning, under a clear sky and gentle breeze, the house seemed less threatening, almost inviting in the soft morning light. I decided to start at the family crypt in the woods, bringing a heavy-duty flashlight and tools to break the rusted gate. The forest was calm as I followed the familiar path. The stone mausoleum stood silent, but the air felt heavier, almost watchful. I broke the rusted chain. The gate creaked open. My flashlight revealed a small chamber with stone walls, a large stone sarcophagus at the center, and 7 smaller niches along the walls. each labeled with a Riley child's name and birth and death dates, all ending in 1887. Yet the newspaper claimed their bodies were never recovered from the mine. So what was buried here? The large sarcophagus bore no name, just the date, December 21st, 1887, carved. Into its lid was the same symbol from the house's doorframe, a circle with a line through it. When I touched the stone, it was ice cold, unnaturally so for a warm September day. As I stepped back, my foot hit a small leather-bound book lying by the sarcophagus. It was a journal I hadn't seen before. Inside the cover, Samuel W. Langford. I sat on a fallen log outside the crypt and began reading. Langford's journal told a different story from the newspapers and Maddox family records. The mine collapse was no accident. Edmund Maddox had ignored safety warnings, but more significantly, he had ordered excavation in an area the local indigenous people warned was sacred, cursed even. The miners uncovered a natural cavern filled with ancient artifacts and ceremonial remains. Many workers refused to dig further, citing eerie sounds, accidents, and an overwhelming dread. Maddox, dismissing it as superstition, brought in the Riley family, recent immigrants desperate for work. On December 21st, 1887, all 7 Riley children were in the mine when it collapsed. Witnesses claimed the children had gathered around something glowing with an unnatural light just before the cave-in. Rescuers heard the children's voices for 3 days, crying, singing, speaking in unknown tongues. Then on Christmas Eve, something emerged, not the children, but something wearing their forms. Racked with guilt or fear, Maddox struck a pact with forces beyond comprehension. With Langford's occult knowledge, they created a boundary on the property to contain these entities. In exchange, the entities wouldn't seek revenge or spread beyond the land so long as rituals and offerings were maintained. Langford's last entry, January 1st, 1888, was chilling. The barrier holds, but imperfectly. They test it constantly. They remember what they were, but they are no longer those children. They are ancient, patient. They will wait a year, a century. Time means nothing to them. I closed the journal, hands trembling. It sounded like madness, a tale born of grief and superstition. But I'd seen the figures at the wood's edge, heard the voices, and found the footprints. As I stood to leave, I noticed an alcove behind the sarcophagus holding strange items, a stained stone bowl, translucent wax candles, and a bone-handled knife. Ritual tools, perhaps. I left them undisturbed and returned to the house, journal in hand. I needed to check the attic for any details about the rituals Langford described. But something was wrong. The 7 crosses at the forest's edge were gone. Only splintered wood remained. The symbol on my door frame was gouged out, deep grooves obliterating it. I rushed to the attic. The shelves of journals were bare, except for a single torn page on the floor. In Richard Maddox's handwriting, it outlined a ritual for the winter solstice. December 21st, it was September 17th. I had 3 months to figure out how to restore the boundary. I didn't stay the night. I grabbed essentials and returned to the bed and breakfast. The innkeeper looked concerned but didn't ask. In my room, I studied the torn page. The ritual was complex, requiring herbs, precise timing, and incantations in an unknown language. I needed help, but who? After days of fruitless research, I remembered Dr. Harrison mentioning the Langford law firm closed in the 1970s. Maybe a Langford descendant still lived nearby. At the county records office, I found a lead. The last partner was Eliza Langford, Samuel's great-granddaughter, living in a nursing home 30 miles away. The next day, I visited Sunny Pines Retirement Community. In a sunroom, I met Eliza, a sharp-minded 92-year-old woman. "You're living in the house," she said, watching me. "I can see it on you." Surprised, I admitted I was. I told her I'd found Samuel Langford's journal and knew about the boundary. She turned pale, gripping her wheelchair tightly. "You shouldn't speak of these things. Names have power. Memories have power. The boundary is failing," I told her. "The crosses are gone. The symbols defaced. I have instructions for the ritual, but I don't know how to perform it properly." She closed her eyes, pained. "We tried to maintain it for generations, my father, my grandfather, back to Samuel. But the price kept growing." "What price?" I asked, though I suspected the answer. "Blood initially, a few drops, then more. By my father's time, sacrifices, animals. Then they wanted children. That's when I ended it. Dissolved the firm, broke the contract. She warned Richard Maddox to destroy the house, but he fled instead." I pleaded, "How can I restore the boundary? What happens if I don't?" She sighed. "They'll spread slowly at first, taking children, replacing them. But they're hungry. Eventually, they'll take more." At last, she gave me a small key. Box 1887.